applicants coming in. They have until the 29th to go through the registration process.
And last year we did multiple lotteries, and so
Yeah.
we anticipate that we will probably have multiple lotteries in the coming months also, but this is a snapshot in time of where we are.
Right, so the law requires us to have an enrollment, we can't just take parents as they come, we have to have enrollment periods until sometime in the summer,
Right.
and so we kind of have to do these enrollment periods, and then if we want to or need to, do a lottery on top of it.
Right, and if we have space for those people automatically, then we won't have to have a lottery. We can just pull them in as students when those enrollment periods close, so. So this is, again, this is a snapshot of where we are at this moment, and there's, again, we're gonna be looking at classroom configurations over the next, couple of months, trying to determine what makes the most sense as numbers come in. And we, the board delegated that responsibility to Luke and myself. If we need to make decisions in between board meetings, and so we're just asking for that to continue to be the recommendation moving forward. But before we take any action, I need to go out for public comment. Is there any other comment at the board level or any questions? Okay, is there any public comment on this item? 3 people, 4 people? All right, Shelley, do you want to get started?
Sure. So if I'm reading this correctly, accepting all of the new applicants would put your in-district percentage at 66%. So I just want to verify that I'm reading it correctly. Right now, I think you're at around 75% in-district, and this would put it at 66% district. So I'm just asking to make sure I'm reading it correctly. Mm-hmm. And then the other question that I have is, once a family accepts enrollment, they have 15 days to accept enrollment. And then during that 15 days, they're filling out applications. You then notify, once they've accepted your offer of enrollment, then they are enrolled in your school. You then notify the district that those families are now enrolled in RVC, so that they're not double enrolled in both systems, and of which you are then both allocating resources or potentially double allocating resources for the same kids. So I know in the past there has been some disagreement around them being registered, not enrolled, so they're not notified, in which case families are allowed to kind of hold their space in both systems up until the first day of school. So I'm wondering if you could clarify what you're going to do this year in terms of when you're going to notify the district and transfer CUME files, so that both systems can plan accordingly. I know the district has to do their teacher pink slips, I think, in April, so it would make sense to kind of coordinate those systems immediately.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask if in the event you lock in a lottery and you end up having to give 2 classrooms back, I'm wondering if the board has a policy set forth to notify the parents what may or may not happen in the event that you have to give back 2 more classrooms or so to the district. That's the initial question I have.
Oh, I was just wondering, you didn't actually say how many classrooms the district is now offering, and if that's worth talking about, and what the steps are, and the actual numbers, what we thought were last year or this year here, compared to what we think is coming next year, as far as if they're actually offering less space, how that what would be the steps forward.
All right. Anyone else before I close the public comment?
Similar to that question, I'm trying to balance, if you had infinite applications, what is the most desirable class size for each grade? And given the number of classrooms which are being discussed right now, how many students total do you actually want before you feel like you have too many students? For, given the facility.
Okay, so I'll jump in. So yes, Shelley, you're reading that correctly, 66%. Historically, people who apply from out of district have a lower rate of actually coming after they've applied. Just looking at the logistics of getting here, traffic down to Francis Drake, and things like that. As far as notification goes, we plan on requesting CUME files before the end of the school year for everybody who comes through this enrollment period. And I've told anybody, because I'm sure this happens in the district as well, we have people who come in and say, I've just registered for the district and I've applied for your school. And then I also applied for Cascade Canyon, and they're casting their net. I said, I always say, make sure that you notify the schools of your decision as soon as possible, because it's good karma to be sharing that information with whatever schools, because we have that where people apply and then the first day of school they don't show up. So we understand that from that perspective. So our plan is to request CUME files, the cumulative records from the district for district kids who are coming over.
Right.
Aye.
But they won't come until after school's over, because the district keeps them until the school year's over, so we can send the request for them, but they won't actually come to us.
Request.
We'll send a notification
By
Before
by
April.
very early
It's our
April.
plan.
by early April.
Yeah, so the registration period closes on March 29th. And so those who have not finished the registration will have to reapply, and we will notify the current schools of all the registrants
do it.
that they've, many of them are kindergartners, so there's no school to notify, but those who are in the upper grades will notify their schools that they have registered here, and that we'll be requesting the CUME files in June when they're complete.
And then, and just to speak to the infinite applications question. Really, our design is nine classes of kids. Maximum class size of 24 K through 3 and 26 4 through 5.
And that's what we're working towards
Yes, ma'am.
eventually.
Yeah.
We don't anticipate having 9 classrooms next year, however,
No,
so.
but that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, that's a balance, I get it.
And then the contingency plan on the district not providing the space that they're supposed to.
Well, first of all, we've only still received the preliminary
Yeah.
offer, so we have to wait until the beginning of April to get our final offer. So it's a little hard for us to.
Right, last year the district offered us 6 in the preliminary and 8 in the final, so
Right.
we'll just have to wait and see what happens and then
Right.
decide what to do.
And a lot of the discussion around the offer of 6 was that we had all these kids who were out of district and that we had an outgoing 5th grade class, but no kids coming in yet. So I think as the information is becoming clearer about the interest in our program and the fact that we don't have these 17 mystery non-in-district students, I think those arguments become weaker. But we have to wait until we see the final offer before we can actually make a comment on the final offer. So I think, we just are where we are at this point in the process, and we have to wait a couple more weeks before we find out what the district's argument will be when the final offer comes in terms of how they justify those numbers. But we look like we're having a lot of interest in our program, and we feel really good about that moving forward.
And I also believe that many fewer of our kids, or many fewer of the kids who have applied are kids who are keeping their feet into schools to see what happens with one. That's definitely the case with some. But, you know, in years past, just anecdotally, it seemed like a more significant number.
We also have a number of siblings that
Yeah.
are coming this year, and they're pretty solid.
And I think people just know, you know, what they've applied for now. I think it's much clearer, who we are and what the situation is, and I think people have made a determination about what they feel is the best option for their students, so,
Ultimately, we just have to wait and see,
Yeah.
like with everything else. Wait and
and
see.
again, we're gonna continue to get, additional applications. We know that this is not like the last final picture that we're going to be looking at, because, you know, people's circumstances change, and so some people who might feel like they've already made a choice somewhere else may still come and apply to us, so we don't, you know, we have to, you know, we meet, you know, most of these people that we've met, so they've come through on tours, they've had conversations with our teachers, so, you know, we are getting a much stronger sense of who these applicants are over time, so.
Quick data question. What's your historic conversion rate from application to enrollment?
I don't know off the top of my head.
And I think going back to revisit year one is not a helpful point for us at this point anymore. We're looking at the real people who are applying, we're looking at what we know about people and feeling more confident than we did in a year when we didn't have a school for people to visit, or that, you know, there was a lot of turmoil in the community that people weren't prepared for. I think now people understand who we are and what we offer, and we're getting more concrete about who is applying and coming through that process with us, so.
And we have had a consistent, steady, historical pattern of growth,
Yeah.
so,
You know, we opened at the beginning of the year with 122, and now we're at 170.
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, so I think we understand where we are and what our challenges are in terms of enrollment and how to evaluate better where we are in the process. I think we got most of them. I think that pink slips, as you called them, have already gone out to most districts, and there's a final opportunity in May, I think it is, for districts who are doing that. I don't think
March
that,
15th is the deadline for the,
yeah, so most of them,
Pink
but
slips,
most districts
they've
probably
done
would do it
it.
this week or have done it already.
That's
So,
right.
I don't think anything that we're doing here will affect another district in a way that they have to worry about doing anything differently than they would. Okay,
Just for
so,
clarification, where the classrooms are today, based upon the Sonoma situation, was 122 in district, is that right?
what are you talking about, Sonoma situation?
The lawsuit, the judge allocated classes and square footage was based on 122,
144,
144,
Yeah.
and
ADA.
no,
No,
enrollment.
students, 136 or 7. yeah.
100, so 137 in district.
ADA.
Yes,
Yeah.
And these are, you know, it's confusing that there's all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
two numbers.
So, better question, here's your chart. If you get 100% of your applications accepted, as you're currently, it's 136 in district. What is that 136 number based upon the result of the lawsuit? What is it based on, 144, 136, 137?
Yes,
Which?
144, let's just talk about enrollment.
Okay, so where you are today, class size, is based on 144. And as of this paper, it is, prediction for next year is 136.
we changed our
Ye-
number
yes.
slightly for next year from last year.
Oh, no, I
You know,
understand.
yes, that's correct.
Yes,
We're
Today we'll
eight
inform
short,
you.
we're 8 short
Right.
of.
In March.
In March,
Yeah,
so.
got it. That's all I was looking for.
Okay, so I will bring it back up, this is an action item just to redelegate the responsibility for making decisions between board meetings. to,
Yeah, if necessary.
Yeah, if necessary. So do I hear a motion for approval?
I move to approve that the board chair and director should continue to have that responsibility between you.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, one absent. Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is our budget revisions and January financials.
So, and the narrative is pretty, and the budget is pretty complete, so I don't think I should make that big presentation. With the budget I posted on, Sunday night, had an error in it that changed the year 3 by, inflated the income by $50,000. That was counting the food revenue sales twice in 2 different lines. And so I caught that when I did the cash flow yesterday. So I sent a new budget out to you on last night and posted it, corrected for that error. And also in the meantime, our SELPA gave me additional guidance on current year budget, current year revenue from both the state and federal government. And so I just cranked those into this one since I'm gonna send it to the state. And then I added the auction, which I had omitted in the Sunday night budget. But the numbers don't change much except for the third year, the net, the operating, the net income drops from 100, I don't know what it was, 114 to 74, about 50,000, because of that double entry of food revenue.
All right,
So do you have any questions?
questions at the board level?
There was some question, one board member asked me a question about the over allocation line item that's gone into other local revenue. And what that was the way the over allocation penalty works, it's assessed on the previous year's rates that the CDE publishes, and that's what the district invoiced us, and that's what we paid. But they mentioned, and I knew, and it's in the regulations, that there's when the current year numbers come out, then they can invoice for the difference. And so I accrued, I think like, I don't have the exact numbers, right, 8,000, which was something like a 5% increase. And then when the actual numbers came out, it was less than that, $3,800 less than that. So when we paid the invoice, which eventually we got in November or something like that, December or January, then I took the remainder of expense that had been accrued for the prior year into income, and Ed Tech advised me to put it into other local income. So that's what that line item is for.
And then you also took a couple of our activities that we do and split them into a couple of line items
Right,
instead of.
so the other income, since there now is this, expenses that didn't get paid go into other income, and then, there's in the line item, in the actual GL line item, you can see in the January expenses, those are, Walker Creek, which we asked donations for, and Script were all bundled in there, and since the Walker Creek only happened in the spring, trying to manage cash flow and separate out which was which just got too confusing for me, so I basically put into the budget the actual line items that are in the GL for those two items.
To track it a little easier.
And track it easier. But the net is the difference in the over allocation, penalty, taking back into income, what is over accrued.
And we haven't budgeted an over allocation penalty this year in our budget.
Yeah, because we have an ADA that's within, I think it's 24 or 25. There's a grace in the regulations, there's a grace, and we're not gonna be close to that. So,
On the food service sales, if the number of students purchasing meals goes down, is this the number, the net still accurate?
yeah,
or-
everything, this is based on assumptions.
Yeah,
I think the assumptions were basically that our costs would be the same as the district's. $4.50 for paid lunches and $3.50 for free and reduced lunches. We just use our current numbers of paid and free and reduced, and we assume that we charge $6, which I think is $1 or $1.50 less than we charge now. And those are the numbers that went into the calculation. And so, none of those numbers are known, they're all assumed.
Yeah, we may get more people
We get,
get it because it's cheaper, and then less people will get it because they
okay,
don't like the food as much, so.
okay, all right.
When we have, our vendors submit proposals, some will have taste testing and invite people to participate in that, so we can get a better census.
and we're well along in the process of applying,
We're gonna have taste testing
doing
in
an
April second.
RFP and taste testing and all that stuff.
Okay.
The big change is we have to, right now with Good Earth, they take all the revenue from paid lunches, and we pay them back for the free and reduced. And then they give us a credit on some of the money in the paid lunches, to reduce what we're paying them. So our net expenses, the invoice, the only invoice we got this year was like $7,800. Next year, all the income and expense will flow through our books as required by the National Prep program. And we'll have to buy software to manage that,
Yeah.
manage everything.
Okay.
I don't really have any more questions. Does anyone else have any questions at this point? Okay. So we'll go out for a public comment then on the budget. Just 3 people? Okay.
I'm just curious, and I'm just trying to understand the process, and I don't think the question is disrespectful, I just want to understand. You changed the budget last night and sent it to the board, and then you didn't upload it on the site until 2 o'clock. I'm just wondering, what happens in between that time, and why did it take so long for you to upload it if you made the changes last night and sent it to the board?
All right.
There was a $200,000 grant that you spoke with about receiving, I think it was back in December, January. And since the board holds fiscal responsibility for the school and accepting a grant, it was agreeing to the grant's contracted use of funds and reported requirements. I'm assuming the board knew about the grant and formally approved the contract. However, I cannot find any public record of board action on this matter. And there's been sort of a lack of transparency. I think we even talked about this in January, but where is this grant from? What is it for? And when was the board notified of the award? And how and by whom was the grant contract approved?
I had a couple questions. One, you have $126,000 booked in the balance sheet for miscellaneous state income, and I was wondering if you could itemize what this, and it said, you said you deposited it in February, so what, account items was it deposited into, what is miscellaneous state income from? I was wondering if in your state aid projection, does that deduct the CDE loan? So does your state aid income already have the CDE loan deducted, or where does that loan get deducted from? I was wondering what percentage of giving for families that have already given, so what's your percentage of number of families that have already made a family giving amount? You've got a large number there projected that's still to come in, and so I wanna know what percentage in terms of how reasonable that assumption is. And then the field trip revenue is projected at 10,000, but you've only collected 660 so far. So what's the basis of the assumption that you're gonna get that in? If you could talk a little bit about the special education, the SPED assumptions, because it seems like that's something that's changed recently or from past budgets. And I don't know how many IEPs you have, it's not a demographic that's on your enrollment, I don't know if it has to be or not, but it's definitely a potential large fiscal impact, and it's something that seems to be growing. So, how many IEPs, and just talk a little bit about, explain how that allocations work in terms of both revenue and expenses.
Okay, I think we can wrap it up.
Yep, that's it for now.
Anyone else before I close public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment.
I can do the IEP question and hand it all over to you, Kyle. We have about 20 kids with IEPs.
Okay, so the timing of the upload, factually, it was uploaded at 9 o'clock last night, same time it was sent to the board.
It says on the website too, 1:58.
There are two, Shelley sent me an email this morning, pointing out about some typographical errors in the headings. And so I changed those, but not one number changed between 9 PM and 2 o'clock, just the headings. The grant, there is no contract for the grant, there's no, it's a gift, just like a parent giving us $1,000 or $100. There is no contractual obligation to do anything. It was an anonymous grant. And, it was budgeted for and it was discussed at board meetings, but there was nothing to approve because there's no contract.
Who's it from?
When, you mean in closed sessions or in?
No, it was certainly discussed,
After the fact.
yeah, after, well, we accept all donations that have no strings attached.
Who's it from?
It's anonymous, I do not know. It was specified as anonymous. So let's see, miscellaneous state income. In the cash flow on page 10 of 11, the three, and I can look and there may have been some other small items, I don't think so. But the three items of LCFF state aid that are projected for February in the cash flow,
The 47,
the 44,788,
yep,
and the 37,622.
Yep.
That is what was in that 126. I don't know if those exactly add up to 126, but I think they're pretty close. That's the income.
So the lottery, property tax and the state income.
Yes. And they show up as cash in this document, but they show up in the income of the January statement.
I thought they showed up on the balance sheet of the January statement.
They showed up on the balance sheet as an asset. I can't remember what I called it.
So they
It
showed
was
up,
the AR item.
they showed up on, in a thing that used to be AR but was called something else.
Well, let's just see what it's called.
It is called,
Cash collections awaiting deposit.
yes.
So that's, I accrued it into the 3 income accounts, so they show up in
February?
January. The income
Okay,
is accrued in January,
okay,
so they show up, they're included in the year-to-date, January numbers that are published here. And if you ask me for a January statement, you'll, with a Public Records Act request, you'll see them sitting there individually. So they're in income in the January income statement, but they weren't received yet, so they're receivable. They are receivable, but Ed Tech wanted me to book it to this 9120, this 9140 cash collections awaiting deposit. That's what they wanted, to book the offset to the income.
so the income was booked in January,
Correct.
noted in cash flow in February,
Correct, because that's when they got deposited in the bank.
deposited in the bank.
Because that's what cash is the cash, not the income.
And the
They're
opening,
different.
and then the beginning cash balance,
They are not included in the beginning cash balance in February.
so the beginning cash balance does not include that.
Correct.
Okay.
The 166,000 does not include those. Because the offset to the income was not cash, it was a receivable. Or this cash collections awaiting deposit, a balance sheet account. Okay,
Keep moving.
percent of giving, 36%. Field trip, the Walker Creek field trip, we don't start collecting money until February, so none of it shows up in the January income statement. But we've collected about half of it already, or about half the parents have contributed. So I'm confident, the numbers that's in the budget assume that we'll have 30% scholarship. And the special ed expense increased because with the same population of students, we